As we continue following the Ahmaud Arbery murder trial, we also continue our deeper dive now into the wider impact of this case when it comes to race relations in this country. Joining us now, mental health expert Wizdom Powell, director of the University of Connecticut's Health Disparities Institute. Wizdom, great to see you.
Great to see you, too.
So listening to Travis McMichael's testimony yesterday and today, 6.5 hours of testimony, did you get a feel for implicit biases in any way that he may have had that led to the death of Ahmaud Arbery?
Absolutely. You know, I think we were all quite surprised to see Travis McMichael take the stand in the first place. But the testimony, as you alluded to, provided really important details about his state of mind leading up to and on February 23rd when he shot and killed Ahmaud Arbery. For example, we heard Travis McMichael state that he was simply trying to find out what Mr. Arbery was doing. But his testimony also made clear that he and his father pursued Ahmaud Arbery with loaded guns in hand. And I think it's important to put that into context as he makes claims of self-defense, which were expected. But his recounting of those events implicate perhaps deeper subconscious psychological processes and motivations at play. I think, first of all, it's important for people to understand that suspicions are not facts. And in many instances, more often than not, those human suspicions are rooted in implicit biases about individuals that are based on race or ethnic difference. And we're seeing that quite clearly being established in the testimony given.
And then what's the impact of that to people of color hearing this testimony and even specifically the description of Arbery as being angry with clenched teeth?
You know, in my 20+ years of doing work in the field of health equity and advancing racial justice, particularly for Black males in our nation, I can't express how many times I've heard the stereotypic description of the angry Black male being leveraged in these kinds of conversations. And what's curious to me is the expectation that one wouldn't be angry when being pursued aggressively with a gun. And also the fact that he's making an assumption about the emotional state, the interior life of this Black man. And that's pretty common, actually, and problematic for lots of reasons. As a community, listening to that information just really rings historical alarms and reminds us of the deep, abiding empathy gaps that we often see play out for Black males. Their humanity is rarely recognized, and in fact, they are reduced to stereotypes, as was the case in this instance. And to hear Travis McMichael actually say that out loud was also striking, but also reminds me of how deeply embedded these implicit biases and assumptions are in the American imagination.
It's interesting, just to follow up on that quickly, talk about angry with clenched teeth, yet at the same time, Travis McMichael gave a yes ma'am, yes ma'am, yes ma'am to the lead prosecutor when she said he didn't curse, right? Yes ma'am. He didn't say anything. Yes, ma'am. He just kept going, and so that completely contradicts how they're trying to portray him as this angry Black man when clearly he wasn't saying anything and he was just trying to get away as Travis McMichael was tried to stop him 3 times.
Absolutely. It's also interesting to think about that in the context of what he expected. You know, expectations of deference on the part of racial and ethnic minorities when confronted with people who have perceived or assumed authority have been with us for a long time. And we heard Travis McMichael say many times that he just wanted to stop and question him. And the fact that he thought that he had a right to do so also stems from a larger issue in our society around power hierarchies. Who has the privilege to refuse that type of approach? Who has the privilege to retain bodily autonomy and a sense of agency even in those moments? We hear Travis McMichael saying over and over again that it was his duty, right, to defend the neighborhood. And that also has deeply embedded roots in racial bias, biases about the encroaching other, that dangerous other who enters a neighborhood or a community that doesn't belong to him or her. Those ideologies are also at play and operating. And it'll be interesting to see how the defense counters that assumption or makes it clear to folks or tries to resolve that in some ways in the minds of jurors.
Wow, interesting. I never even thought about the implicit bias in that term, defender of the neighborhood, and how it would apply with racial context. You know, the defense has called for mistrial because of the presence of black pastors in the courtroom, specifically Reverend Jesse Jackson. Defense attorney saying they're concerned about the influence on the jury. It may sway the jury. Defense attorney Jason Sheffield even saying that the people who are joining the Arbery family in the courtroom are part of a larger conversation that is happening nationally that has been funneled down into the community, and so they represent a national conversation that is for the conviction of the defendants. I mean, I was astonished by that comment. What was your reaction to that? And you know, how did you read that and how he said that? I mean, of course, this is a national conversation. We've been in the middle of a racial reckoning in the past year and a half, 2 years.
Yeah, it's shocking, right, that would even come into play. But here's the rub. Racial trauma occurs collectively. Therefore, the healing that is required to overcome, move through, and metabolize that trauma also has to happen collectively. So what you're seeing play out here is a cultural sort of way of dealing and healing that has existed for Black communities forever. We have always called our ministers to the proverbial threshing floor to stand alongside us in moments like these when we're confronting collective trauma. I don't understand why that would be problematic now. I mean, if ever there was a moment when we need a coming together, a collective stance on healing and moving through a moment, it's now. And I can't imagine why you would be threatened by that, except that you don't want to present want the public to see a unified front being presented for Ahmaud Arbery. And we should be standing in solidarity with any person who has experienced this type of racialized or potentially racialized violence. I see it as racialized violence. I realize that some folks may not. But I think that it's important for us to not interrogate that way of healing because it is indicative and natural to the ways that Black communities have healed for generations.
Hi everyone, George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.